Lucas Montgomery, an American police officer, rescued the life of a baby by finding him in a garbage can. He received an unexpected call after 25 years, when he was no longer a police officer, that would change his life forever. Lucas Montgomery was born and raised in Oregon. He always had a kind heart and was determined to achieve his objectives. In his teen years, he was a very curious and active young guy. He was constantly walking in the adjacent woods and parks despite living in a large metropolis like Portland. Lucas showed great bravery by walking till he reached rivers and waterfalls in the woods, but he was terrified of running into a bear. Lucas's parents advised him to choose a profession to pursue after high school. He wasn't very uncertain. "I wanted to be a police officer." As a child, he never showed any interest in guns and never entertained any fantasies of engaging in a firefight with bandits. Lucas was more focused on finding ways to make a difference without hurting anyone while still protecting the community and its citizens. He was aware, nevertheless, that he would also have to use force against people who had nefarious intentions in his capacity as a police officer. Lucas didn't give up on his ideas, though. He performed a lot of legal research, picked up a gun, and learned to identify different kinds of drugs. He also made an effort to communicate with people in the most respectful way possible. According to the manual's instructions, the young police officer underwent all the rigorous training that the school required, but he had no idea that the real world would soon put his dedication to assisting people to the ultimate test. For many years, Lucas Montgomery performed on the streets of Portland. He participated in drug-related investigations, carried out routine patrols, and occasionally followed thieves through the neighborhoods. But that day, which started out routinely, changed the policeman's life indefinitely. He left the police station in his car. He leisurely strolled around a variety of Portland neighborhoods, seeing everything that was happening that morning. A rather odd noise suddenly caught the police officer's attention as he was entering a residential area on the outskirts of the city. At that time of day, there weren't many people in the neighborhood walking the streets. Most of the residents had already left for work. He felt awake, and he decided to follow the sound. It grew louder and clearer as it got closer. Lucas decided to get out of the automobile so he could investigate the noise more quietly and thoroughly. He didn't know what was going on, but it seemed like something that needed to be looked into. He went in the direction of the noise, which led him to a busy intersection known for drug trade and violent crimes caused by conflicts between rival gangs. And this intricate regional history particularly worried the officer. As he moved through the neighborhood, keeping his hand close to the holster, he prayed he wouldn't have to draw his pistol. Lucas was tense. "I had the mindset that anything may happen at any time." As he rounded the corner, he saw a group of people who seemed to be in tremendous trouble. When they saw Lucas, they immediately hurried over and started talking at once. The policeman asked them to explain what was happening. One of the women in the group, who was already crying, pointed to the dumpster a few meters away. Lucas approached her with the preconceived notion that it was a drug delivery, but when he got close to her, the sound he had previously heard again. After reaching so close to the source, he realized how bad the situation was. At first, he thought it was a cat. They sounded like a baby placed in a trash can with numerous bags of trash, blowflies, and other noises. Lucas was shocked. He had never before seen a baby in that state, and he began to wonder why those people hadn't taken the baby away. Lucas still had a chance to save the boy because the boy's ability to still weep in spite of his extreme weakness. The officer was speechless in the face of what he was witnessing and could only think about how awful it had been for someone to dump a young animal in such an embarrassing situation. Throughout his career, Lucas had dealt with real-life instances of people leaving infants at fire stations, placing them up for adoption, and even sending them to orphanages, but this was the first time he had encountered it. The police officer took a long breath, gathered his thoughts, and then he began to move. As soon as the officer heard the child sobbing, he removed the rubbish that was covering his small body, carefully removed the child from the garbage, and then carefully lifted him up in his arms. Lucas could see that the child's vital signs were still in order, but he also noticed that his respiration seemed unusually slow. He reasoned that it may be expected in such a situation given that the little child had been partially suffocating beneath the debris for an unknown amount of time. He held the baby closely, keeping him warm in his arms. There was no time to spend, so he contacted 911 right away. When the ambulance arrived in a matter of minutes, there were nurses and paramedics on the rescue team, but Lucas felt he couldn't leave the helpless youngster again. He looked at the boy in his arms, who suddenly seemed more relaxed. He obeyed his heart's guidance and got into the ambulance with the rescue crew and rode with them to the hospital without ever looking away from the child. Lucas realized that he was no longer able to care for the baby without giving him a name. He deserved to be acknowledged as a special individual. He then began addressing him as Gabriel, much like the angel. Lucas wasn't especially religious, but he thought the name perfectly expressed the small child's purity and gentleness. The doctor ran several tests at the hospital to make sure the youngster was healthy. Lucas was especially worried that Gabriel had become ill from spending so much time in the garbage. Fortunately, despite this, no symptoms or evidence of disease were identified. The boy's back may have been experiencing an allergic reaction because of some redness the doctor just mentioned. The officer found it extremely difficult to leave Gabriel by himself in the hospital while he returned to his home and family, but Lucas made a point of dropping by every day as long as the child was still being treated. Gabriel gradually recovered his health and got more powerful. After the city's social workers took care of the boy's circumstances, Mary and James Wood, a young couple, decided to adopt him. They immediately fell in love with the boy. They were from Eugene, a town south of Portland. Of course, the story of his defection also affected them. After learning that Lucas Montgomery was the officer who had located the child, the youngster was given the name Gabriel throughout the adoption process. When Mary and James chose to keep the name because they loved it, Lucas was ecstatic. Though relieved that the child had quickly found a home, he was disappointed that he could no longer regularly visit the child. When Lucas saw Gabriel in the hospital, he immediately felt a connection to him and a tiny bit of responsibility for him. Gabriel grew up in a lovely, nurturing environment. The young boy was never told about his adoption or subsequent desertion by his parents, Mary and James. This rejection didn't make him feel scared or angry, but he couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he had been dumped outside of a big city. It tormented him that no amount of other situations would ever be able to satisfy his insatiable curiosity about this idea. Even though Mary and James knew there might never be an answer to that query, they nevertheless wanted to take some action to give their kid some comfort. They requested Lucas from the Portland police one day in order to accomplish this. They later learned that the official had left the company and was now working as a ranger in one of Oregon's state parks. Lucas had requested a transfer at some point following the incident involving Gabriel. In a way, his encounter with the baby had reawakened in him the desire to work in law enforcement, which was more in accordance with his philosophy of living. The couple remembered how the officer had gone above and beyond the call of duty to ensure Gabriel's safety and recuperation. They persisted in trying to locate Captain Phillips, who was now retired but knew where his former partner may be. Lucas was more of a social worker than a policeman, in my opinion. They learned over the phone that Lucas never forgot what had happened that day and that he often wondered what would have happened to the child after his adoption. As a result, they planned to meet in Lucas's cabin, which is close to a national park. But at least he's among the beasts in the woods now. He must be happy aiding tourists and adventurers away from the sordid world of crime. He suggested that I felt some of what a father must feel when I saw my child in danger. Gabriel gave Lucas a big hug and explained that he had to thank Lucas in person. The boy said he wanted to see his biological mother so he could personally forgive her. He said that he was interested in finding out if Lucas Montgomery knew anything about his past that could lead him to the woman. At that point, Lucas's smile vanished. In any case, he said that he had tried to discover who his mother might be. Captain Phillips had forbidden her from searching Portland's maternity wards for the names of all the women who had given birth in the 2 to 3 months before de Gabriel's desertion. Lucas remarked, "Because of sarcasm like that, I left the corporation. The captain advised me to pursue actual evil guys if I wanted to make the world a better place." The child felt terrible for that knowledge, so he wouldn't be able to contact his mother and comprehend what had occurred 16 years ago. At the conclusion of the meeting, in front of the boy and his parents, the man said, "I don't even know if it's feasible to track it." Lucas spent 2 full days sorting chips and another day making calls. It was already 9 o'clock on a Thursday when he learned that a woman named Julie Heatfield had given birth almost 2 months before Lucas found the child in the trash. Out of all the options that have stood the test of time, this chip appears to be the best one. That evening, he gave Mary and James Wood a call. Since the woman's name didn't include a phone number, he asserted that she lived outside of Cottage Grove, probably in the middle of some woods, and that they would have to journey there to speak with her. When Mary and James learned that Cottage Grove was so near to where they lived, they were shocked. If this were the case, Gabriel might have spent practically all of his childhood next to his birth mother without ever realizing who she was or how much closer to him she actually was. The next day, Lucas drove his car up to Eugene and picked up young Gabriel. They then traveled on a dirt road, crossing a few streams along the way, until they came across a small community of huts inhabited by people working in the nearby lumber business. By asking the residents a few questions, they were able to determine that the house was Julie Heatfield's. When they knocked, a young woman under 40 who was smoking a cigarette opened the door. She looked suspicious as she thoroughly scrutinized Gabriel. Lucas Montgomery presented himself as a park ranger and a former Portland police officer before asking the woman if she had lived in the region for the previous 16 years. "Yes," she said, adding that she had every intention of forgetting the city and everyone who had ever lived there. The woman stated that she had been a nasty person and that the reason she was now an impoverished widow was because she had earned that fate when Lucas prodded her to explain what had happened. Julie said, "I married a bad man, did bad things, and now I reside alone in this end of the world with my remorse. Sir, I cursed myself. Absolutely, I say. God punished me before I died away." Lucas asked, trying to seem friendly, "Did one of the past actions you did include a child?" Julie bent down, her eyes widening with tears, declaring that her time had come. "You came to have me arrested, cop?" Julie continued, "I told him that we were going to pay for what he did, I told him." Lucas encouraged her to take a deep breath and questioned who exactly were us. Julie revealed that she had married Jeremy Heatfield at the age of 18, a man who had undergone a complete transformation since starting to cut wood in the forests for the company. Jeremy was not only dismayed to learn that Julie was expecting, but also disdainful of the fact that she was pregnant. A curse for what I permitted to be done wrong to a helpless youngster. She was crying at this point in the story, as was Gabriel, but Lucas gripped her shoulders and promised her that she wouldn't be imprisoned. The two hugged after 16 years. The last time they did so, Gabriel was just a newborn. "I survived, Mother. I made it. I met your boy 16 years ago, and he's here to meet you, so take a big breath and pay attention to what I'm going to say," the young man stated. Julie raised her head to re-observe Gabriel. At the end of that day, Lucas Montgomery experienced a sense of accomplishment unlike any other in his life. The most difficult event of his life had led to an investigation, which was finally complete. If you enjoyed the story, please click the like button. You'll likely feel the same way about the next video that just started playing. Till the next video, have a good session.